Welcome in to Kicking the Rear Podcast, episode number 20. My name is Joe Yarshin. Today we're going to be reviewing Brandon Turner's book, The Book on Rental Property Investing. This is the third book I've reviewed of Brandon Turner's, and they all kind of have the same looking cover, just different colored letters, and they each go over a different topic. This particular book reviews rental property investing specifically, and he's very comprehensive in his analysis. Again, loved this book. 10 out of 10 would recommend. A lot of good general information as well as specific information for property investing and rental information. So without further ado, let's get into it. Right away in chapter 1, Brandon Turner discusses why he loves rental properties so much. So much of these concepts have to do with leverage, rate of return on investment, and controlling the investment itself. He always, states people always need a place to live, and I think that's true. And you hear that a lot in the industry, but certainly in this introductory chapter 1, he goes through some of those other reasons he likes real estate, and he discusses the 4 wealth generators within this space. So there's appreciation, which can be natural or forced appreciation. He goes into cash flow, tax savings, and finally loan pay down, including the principal and interest balances. So in his previous book, he reviewed how to invest with low or no money down. He reiterates that on page 30, some ideas about how to do that contextually. And then he talks about the 5 top difficulties when rental property investing. One is it takes time to build the wealth. It can be all consuming. You have to deal with difficult people, paperwork and bookkeeping, and then ultimately you can lose your investment. So there is a level of risk to it. So he goes into some of the excuses of why people don't want to get into it and debunks some of those myths, which I really liked how he went into that. Talks about compound interest versus simple interest and the time horizon and how that comes into play in the long term. And then in chapter 2, he goes into the 5 keys to rental property success. He talks about writing your goals down, read them aloud every day. He quotes Grant Cardone in this chapter. He talks about Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich. So just a lot of awesome concepts. Again, realize that you are who you associate with. We've heard this terminology and idea in several of the books I've reviewed. And then studying the right sources. So who should you learn from? He goes into several sources of information, books, podcasts, and people that have the knowledge that you want to follow in the form of podcasts, forums, YouTube, blogs, etc. So he also talks about coaching programs, boot camps, classes, all that stuff. Picking the right plan. He says that having a solid plan is important. And then the key to success in rental property investing is to create the right plan. He says, you should ask these questions when you're planning an outline of your initial plan. Is what is your end goal? Where are you headed? What kind of strategy do you want to use? What don't you want to do? What kind of properties do you want to buy? How often will you buy? And then how are you going to finance the properties? That was on page 59 and 60. He talks about how to physically put together this plan, which I liked. Again, a lot of introductory knowledge, but still is helpful in steering your ship when it comes to investing in real estate. So I like this section a lot. He gives a lot of space to write down your goals and write down your key metrics and what you're trying to accomplish. In chapter 3, he gives 4 sample plans to make it in real estate. So these are just high level overview plans, but these are good outlines of what you can accomplish. So the first plan, he says how to make $1 million through rental properties. In the next plan, he talks about building wealth through single family homes. And he has lots of awesome graphs on page 75 that kind of show the breakdown of a purchase price and cash borrowed and some of the expenditures that come in with that. Plan 3, he discusses house hacking, which is very popular now. A lot of people are familiar with this term house hacking. You get like a duplex or like a townhome building, and then you live in one side and you rent out the other. That person pays for both, and you're usually net cash flow positive by doing that. So he discusses that strategy in depth. And then, of course, number 4, probably another popular strategy now is the BRRRR strategy. So buy, rehab, rent, refi, repeat. David Green, also affiliated with the BiggerPockets network, reviews that strategy in depth, but so does Brandon Turner in here. And then how to make $100,000 per year with the BRRRR strategy. I thought that was really great. And then he discusses some of the drawbacks of each strategy in this chapter. And then immediately going into chapter 4, the 10 measurables of your real estate team. So number 1, he talks about your spouse, getting them on board. That's a challenge for a lot of people that are in this space. Is one person will be very driven in the real estate investing journey, and maybe the other one isn't as educated or doesn't understand the drive. So you have to have your best team member on board, which is your spouse. Then he discusses focusing on the education and starting slow, encourage the other person to learn, share why it's important, and then including them in the process. So, it's me speaking about my own situation. Like my wife, Christine, is involved with all of our purchases, and she likes to understand the high level key points of each deal. And she doesn't slow the deal down, but she does ask critical questions that kind of give me an opportunity to prove why the deal is good or why the deal is great. And certainly questions should never hurt your case. They should always improve the reason to do the deal. So that checks and balances, I think, is critical. And then number 2, he says to have a mentor or an accountability partner, and how you can position yourself where landlords hang out, ask family and friends who are renting, ask real estate agents, hang out on BiggerPockets forum. Then he says to partner with real estate agents. You want someone who's responsive, hungry, has a pulse on the local market. In a previous podcast, I had an interview with Jason Hilbelink with Parks Realty. He's a really great resource. So if you ever need somebody, he's awesome. I know several realtors in the Middle Tennessee market, but he's somebody who's both responsive, hungry, and has a pulse on the local market. Somebody who's tech savvy, has investment experience, offers one-on-one support, is well-connected, honest, and displays integrity. So he talks about, should you get your real estate license? There's a lot of pros to doing it. So if you get your real estate license, of course, you can have access to the MLS. So you can find deals on there. You can have access to property, real estate relationships, controlling the deal, getting commissions back on your purchases. Really awesome stuff there. He goes into some of the cons, paperwork, education, cost, disclosures, risk, all that. Next, partnering with lenders, contractors, handyman, and then other books I've reviewed discuss this in quite long detail, but having a bookkeeper or your team member or spouse as your bookkeeper, or if you're the bookkeeper yourself, having the right CPA involved, a lawyer, an insurance agent, and finally your property manager if you're going to do the property management yourself. He says a great property manager can mean the difference between success and failure for your investment. So page 110, Chapter 5 is all about analyzing a rental property. So he discusses how to analyze a property based on the cash flow and appreciation. He discusses what is cash flow, calculating income, estimating rental property expenses, and he does a high-level overview of all those key points there. He did a great job of discussing this in his previous 2 books as well, so there's a great refresher in there. On page 117, he shows some examples of capital expenses, what the total cost of replacement is, the typical lifespan of those costs, the cost per year, and the cost per month if you're going to budget for these types of things. So really great information here. Putting all the numbers together, so taxes, insurance, flood insurance, vacancy, repairs, CapEx or capital expenditures, water, sewer, garbage, gas, electricity, HOA, snow removal, lawn care, property management, how to budget for all these things. He goes into that. So determining cash flow, again, income minus expenses equals cash flow, cash on cash return for your investment. He discusses what that is. So cash on cash return on investment is total annual cash flow divided by your total investment. Good rules of thumb to go on, the 50% rule. So cash flow equals total income times a 0.5 minus mortgage and principal and interest. He goes over the 2% rule. He uses an example of a property 123 Main Street analysis. So he just goes into like a hypothetical using this 2% rule. And then this chapter just really goes deep into the numbers. So if you're a numbers person, this is really great information. And then at the end of this chapter, he just puts it all together again and wrapping it up in a nice way. So chapter 6, page 137, investing while living in an expensive area. He talks about how looking for homes on sale can be a good idea, but is the price relative to your budget? What's working in the area? Checking the outskirts of a neighborhood. Long distance rental property investing. David Green has a book on this. He talks about DIY investors using long distance partner, all these other types of investment vehicles like a turnkey property. So it's a little more hands off initially. And then he discusses the downsides of turnkey investing, the financial, analytical, ethical things that go into it. In chapter 7, types of rental properties. So we have single family homes. He goes into the pros and cons of those. Then he discusses multi-family real estate, pros and cons of those. Condos, townhomes, real estate owned foreclosures through the banks. Fixer-uppers, what is a fixer-upper? How you can do some of the pros of that is less competition, forced appreciation, unique financing options. He talks about some of the cons of that as well: stress, out-of-pocket costs, hidden expenses. 5 questions to ask before investing in a fixer-upper. So he discusses that. And finally, commercial real estate. So there's also triple net investing as well. That's something another one of my podcast guests discuss, Pat Smart. I'm going to upload that hopefully sometime before the end of the year. But in chapter 8, we go to location. So he's talking about even in a bad market, location is a way to still buy and sell property. So he goes into the various type of neighborhood classes. So we have a Class A neighborhood, a Class B, and a Class C, and also a Class D neighborhood. He discusses on page 169 a resource you can use to look up the crime stats in these areas. So cityprotect.com, neighborhoodscout.com, citydata.com, and usa.com/rank. These are great resources to use. And then he talks about like the schools, jobs, unemployment, population growth, proximity to local businesses, transportation, price to rent ratio. So your price to rent ratio is your median monthly rental price divided by your median sales price. That comes into play when you're looking at where to buy, of course. He discusses vacancy rates, property tax, and insurance rates. And then in chapter 9, he says how to find rental properties. A common one is the MLS. A lot of people make comments and negative statements about the MLS, but I think that there are still really good deals on there. Partnering with your wholesalers, realtors is great. Direct mail marketing campaigns for deals, driving for dollars, looking in your neighborhoods with those ugly signs. You can look up the eviction records, BiggerPockets Marketplace, Craigslist, wholesalers, like I said before. So great resources there. Chapter 10, he discusses which properties make the best rentals. So he talks about bedrooms, the age of the home, garages, utilities, lawn, parking, location. He discusses the 8 problems he looks for when shopping for rental properties. He discusses on page 197, I highlighted something that I thought was cool. He said on ugly countertops and cabinets, you can paint old cabinets and make them look brand new. Rust-Oleum sells a really nice cabinet refinishing kit for less than $100 at Home Depot that turns nasty cabinets into modern works of art. So I thought that was a really cool tidbit. Like if you're a DIY person, you can do some of these things on your own for limited or a small cost up front. And then chapter 11, submitting your offer. So he discusses how to make an offer offering a property on the MLS, what an earnest money deposit is for and what it looks like, how much it is, what happens to that earnest money ultimately should come back to you if the deal closes. Sometimes you can lose your earnest money depending on the parameters of the contract verbiage. He says what you should include in the offer, how much should you offer, 16 different tips for getting your offer accepted. One of the books I'm going to review is Negotiating Real Estate by Jay Scott, another affiliated partner of the BiggerPockets community. So I look forward to showcasing that book next or very soon. There's some of the overlap of these concepts in that book as well. So I won't touch on it too much, but he does discuss price anchoring strategy, which is really cool. In chapter 12, real estate negotiation. Again, I won't go too much into this since the next book we're going to talk about is all about that. So he says what the process of negotiation is, repairs, credits, possession date, items left in the property, when to negotiate, tips for successful negotiation. He even hypes up the book that we're going to review next called The Book on Negotiating Real Estate. So it's really great. So we'll skip that since it's kind of redundant if we're going to talk about it in the future. But we have chapter 13, financing your rental property. So you can do a very attractive offer, the all cash offer. So he goes into what that looks like. And then liability with cash offers. There's conventional lending, of course. Pros and cons of both of those. Portfolio lenders, so how to find them. What are private lenders? He goes into what that entails, where to find these private lenders, private money versus hard money lending. Again, a lot of great strategy there. So how to get private lenders to say yes. Other creative methods like your home equity, which we've discussed on several episodes, seller financing, partnerships, house hacking, BRRRR investing. Goes into all the pros and cons of these. So I love that chapter, very comprehensive again. So in chapter 14, he says how to get a loan approved / guaranteed. He quotes Andrew Jackson, "I have always been afraid of banks." So I thought this was funny, working for a bank myself. Understanding how a loan works. So he kind of discusses what the banker's role in the loan approval is. Understanding how underwriters think is important. He says the 12-digit code you need to get your loan approved. So he talks about the property type, property location, property condition, loan amount, debt to income ratio, which I talk about on my short videos, what that is, loan to value ratio, credit score, repayment source, experience, cash reserves, recent credit changes, compensating factors. Those are all things to be aware of. So make your lender's job easier to get your loan approved. So turning in your tax documents, W-2s, pay stubs, personal financial statements. In chapter 15, he reviews the due diligence process. So probably one of the most important chapters in this book is the due diligence chapter. So he discusses what due diligence is, how title inspection is involved, title companies and attorneys are involved, document inspection, seller disclosures, tax returns, current leases, physical inspections and how those come into play, and other inspections you might want to get depending on the property. After the inspections, what happens from there. So again, great chapter to be aware of. Chapter 16, getting ready to close. So other things you have to do is order insurance for landlords, setting up your bank accounts, preparing forms, bookkeeping, of course. And then he discusses some of the pros and cons of an LLC for liability purposes, protecting and insulating yourself from a lawsuit liability. So basically what the purpose of that is, going through your final walkthrough of the property, planning your rehab, signing your documents, all great stuff in that chapter. So chapter 17, managing your rentals, part 1. So he discusses the self-management strategy versus property management strategy. Again, we've reviewed some of these concepts in previous books, but what the role of a property manager is, disadvantages of property management, property manager interview questions you can ask. So he doesn't take a side on this. It kind of just depends on your unique situation, which way you should go about it. And then he discusses, is this a business or a hobby of yours? Because if it's a hobby, a lot of things can go wrong. If you treat it like a business, a lot of things can go right. So getting a property ready to rent, 5 ways to get great tenants, Craigslist, signs in the yard, newspapers, MLS, existing tenants, property managers, accepting phone calls. So you can kind of set up different phone numbers that aren't directly tied to your cell phone, showing property to tenants, what your application process looks like, what items go into the rental agreement. And then, of course, immediate disqualifiers, which he goes into in the screening process, and then verifying income and rental history, credit and credit checks and how to kind of go through that, accepting and denying an applicant, accepting your rent payments, signing your lease agreements, all these awesome things he goes into, like your move-in condition report checklist, handing over keys, bookkeeping and taxes, all these awesome things. And then chapter 18, managing your rentals, part 2. So he talks about the 10 most common repairs you'll encounter, preventative maintenance, landlord versus tenant responsibilities, dealing with difficult tenants, training them, how to deal with late payments, including your neighbors in conflicts and mitigating those processes, moving in. He talks about pets or people that are moving in or not on the lease, breaking leases. He talks about how to deal with some of these negative things of tenants. And then chapter 19, exit strategies and 1031 exchanges. I've discussed the 1031 exchange before. I'll probably have to do more on that in my short form videos, but the 1031 exchange is a great way, again, for taxation and delaying or tax deferred strategies with the IRS, seller financing, cash outs, 1031 exchanges are all in here, along with examples and basic rules. You do want to get a professional involved when you're doing a 1031 exchange. So he says the steps here are: you decide to sell and do a 1031 exchange. You list your property for sale. You begin looking for replacement properties. You find a qualified one. You negotiate, accept an offer. You close on the sale. Identify 3 properties within 45 days. You sign a contract. You let your qualified intermediary work with the title company. You close on the property. So he shows that how a 1031 exchange can make you millions. He shows the years, the purchase price, the profit, and the equity reinvested, which I thought was awesome. And then the end game of that, of course, of a 1031 is to either cash out or to die and pass it on to your heirs. So just some final thoughts on there in page 343 and 344. And then in chapter 20, he discusses his final thoughts on this book. I loved everything about this book. Again, some of it was redundant because of the other books I've read of his. So I would say that if you pick any one of his 3 books, you're in good shape as far as understanding the rental investing property strategy. But of course, his other book is more so on the creative financing and identifying properties. So this one's just basically about, again, to create wealth, intelligent buy and hold real estate investing strategies. I hope you loved today's episode. I talked a little fast today because there was a lot to cover, but if you liked everything, please like, subscribe, share with anyone you know that would be interested in real estate investing books, business books, entrepreneur mindset books. I love creating content for you guys. So I'm going to keep getting better. And again, bippity boppity investment property. Let's go.